so much for being here, Billy. We're so excited that you could come out and see us in the afternoon. I know when you're at a festival, it's not necessarily ideal to come out mid-afternoon the day before you perform. What is it about a festival that makes you come and do events like this?
Well, I'm very interested in what people are thinking and feeling, you know. There was an assumption in the 90s that, culture was changing and the cool kids had taken over. And that didn't necessarily work out the way we envisioned it. And of course, no one saw the explosion of technology and how it was going to change the way that people not only listen to music, but how they connected with one another. So I'm a progressive artist, and I want to understand the way people are receiving their information and also communicating.
And you mentioned technology there. That's one of the things that I have obviously admired about you. You seem to have embraced the way that technology has changed as a way of getting your sort of thoughts and information out to people. I mean, even simple things like Twitter. I love following your Twitter feed because it kind of gives me an insight into you as a person and an artist that perhaps I hadn't seen before. Is that how you view that?
Yeah, but it's a mixed blessing because I don't think people necessarily listen to rock and roll to hear about your problems. You know, it's an escapist business. Projection is a big part of it, which is how, so talented bands with the right clothes and the one good song can get over for a few years because people will believe whatever image they've created. But over the course of now I'm going on about 25 years, part of who I am becomes part of the bigger story. So I'm okay with it, but there are definitely times where I would guess it hurts.
Can I ask, because in the old days there was this sort of mythology of the artist, you would only hear about a band occasionally in an article in a newspaper or a magazine. You'd have to search out information about the people that you like. These days, because of technology, you can find out about a band by the end of that week. You can download their entire catalogue. You can read about them on Wikipedia. You can almost become an instant expert in an artist within a week instead of having to go around to a record shop to find a record and play it over and over and love it over and over. What are the advantages of that, and what is the downside of that?
Well, the advantages that we see now, and this is outside the business part, right, is that anybody in the world can connect with a band. It's fantastic. I mean, that's mind-blowing to someone who came out of the 60s, 70s. The fact that a kid in India, if they decide they're a Block Party fan or somebody sends them a link, holy cow, they can get that music and they can find it, and that changes the world instantly. The downside of it is that it sort of levels everything into kind of a one song at a time, one moment at a time, and then of course let's call it the negative part, which is, well, if I light myself on fire, you'll click on my link more. So it does on some level disincentivize real art and bands that have a real message because it takes a lot longer to get that message across.
What I love is that you've been a great defender of the music industry in a lot of ways. I know recently you've been arguing in America about the rights for artists. Can you talk us through some of that?
Well, I don't want to assume anything. So how many people here know about the basic construct of the music business as it was for the last 50, 60 years? Okay, so not everybody. Basically, real quick, the way the music business worked, we signed in 1990, we signed a contract for 7 albums, which would be the equivalent of about 14 years. We had almost no rights. We actually had to pay to make our albums. They'd give us a loan, but they'd still own the album. So it's the equivalent of somebody loaning you money to buy a house, but you don't actually own the house, but you have to repay the money back. That's how it was all those years. So the fact that artists are now beginning to own their records, but the reaction in the music business has been the opposite. So I own all my records now, but like if you're a young band, 20 years old, and you're getting signed, in America particularly, they do these things called 360 deals where now they own your t-shirts, they own, if you start a perfume line, a clothing line, they basically own a part of you for as long as that deal is. So what ends up happening is a lot of kids growing up on the American Idol myth, which is fame equals Facebook people equals success, which it doesn't. They're willing to trade that, and then somebody's completely ripping them off. And then when they wake up at 30 and they have no money and they're back working at Starbucks, they go, oh, what happened? It's over,
I think the most important question that comes out of that is, if you were going to release a cologne, what would it smell like?
Sort of a bat cave mixed with rose and patchouli.
Did you say a bat cave?
Yeah, bat cave.
Are you a Batman fan?
I was a Batman fan, yeah. Although, looking back, I realized how homoerotic the entire show was. And actually, a personal story, I once worked at a shop, and the owner said that this guy he owned a building. The guy had died, and he said, "Oh, you want to move in the guy's shop?" I mean, the guy's apartment, and we were poor, and so we moved in, and unfortunately, the guy turned out to be a pedophile. Getting all this dead guy stuff. And so the key image in my mind was he was doing his own homoerotic art, and there was a painting he had done of Robin sucking off Batman. So you brought up some bad memories there, my friend.
I guess you can't slide down a pole that many times without getting attracted. I love that you're into wrestling. That's what when I'm reading your stuff on Twitter, you tweet all the time about wrestling.
Yeah, I'm part of a wrestling organization in Chicago called Resistance Pro, and actually the show just ended in Chicago. It killed me not being at the show, but obviously I'm here with the beautiful people. But God bless you. Glad you're here. And yeah, but it's fun. It's the thing about wrestling for people who don't get it and go, what the hell is that? The thing about wrestling is it came out of the circus. It was originally a circus thing. Guys would do fake combat. They'd get a big burly guy out and they'd say, "Is anyone here tough enough to take on, Big John or whatever?" And they'd put a plant in the audience, and he'd pretend he was from the area. I'm from Brizzy, And so they'd fake fight, and then people would wager. It was a way to get people, the suckers in the crowd, to bet money. And then eventually it got big enough to where it broke off, but it's from the circus. So if you look at it as a circus thing, it makes a lot more sense. It's just, it's elephants and clowns.
But where did your particular love of it come from? Was it someone that you fell in love with, or was it a particular wrestler or something that...
Well, when I was a kid, it was on TV in Chicago, in between sort of the cartoons on Saturday morning. This is early 70s, so... and then there was a lot of these guys at the end of their career, like we had a Nazi character. Seriously, there was a guy, Baron von Raschke. He used the claw. Okay, can I do the claw on you? His move was, his finishing move was he'd do this. Okay, now you gotta follow it. No. Sorry. No. You're ahead of me here, my friend. Okay, so he'd do the claw, and then his Nazi grip was so strong you'd fall to your knees, right? And then you'd submit in pain and pass out. Baron von Raschke. It's pretty amazing that in 1975 this guy's working the Nazi gimmick. Think about it. It's amazing.
Also, it's amazing that when I was at university and I was listening to Siamese Dream over and over and over again, I never imagined that one day in front of thousands of people I would be on my knees in front of you.
In the claw. In the claw. Not just on your knees, in the claw.
You mentioned Chicago, of course, and a lot of your love of sports comes from Chicago. You still have a connection to, I know, the Cubs, the baseball team there, and you've sung at games and thrown the pitch, haven't you?
No, I won't do the pitch. No, because invariably, you miss it, and then the people boo. And I was lucky for anyone who's a basketball fan. I was there through all the Michael Jordan years, and I knew guys on the team, and I would travel with the team. Not travel with the team, but I'd travel where the team would go, and it was a pretty amazing era. For a basketball fan, it was to see Michael Jordan play. I probably saw Michael Jordan play in person probably 60, 70 times.
Wow.
There's that famous game in Utah where he had the flu, and they've been showing it like on Gatorade commercials. I was at that game. It was pretty amazing. You're talking about one of the greatest athletes ever. To see somebody right there and see them at their peak is incredible.
From an artistic point of view, I'm sure that you have a myriad of highlights, and I'd love to discuss some of those. But if you take it external to that, the things that are the trappings, the idea of being able to meet your sporting heroes, or for me, I'm the biggest Simpsons fan in the world. I love the Simpsons so much. My favourite line in the history of the Simpsons is Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, Homer Simpson, smiling politely. Yeah. The greatest line in the history of The Simpsons, as far as I'm concerned. Yes. Was that exciting for you?
Very exciting. Very exciting. And honestly, the number one most talked about thing I've ever done.
Right.
Which is, It's a bit weird, right? Because I've done a lot of cool stuff, and been in bed with some interesting people. You know what I mean?
Oh, we'll get to that.
No. My point is that that's the number one thing. But the cool thing is I'm such a fan, and they were so cool. And this is a small thing, but I think everyone can appreciate this. This is how cool they were. When we were done, you go in and do the voiceover, and then you read the line, whatever. And they'd say, "Oh, read a little faster, read a little more angry." And we'd get, okay, record. And then afterwards, we were leaving, and they were thanking us, and they said, "Write down the names of all your nieces, nephews, cousins, and we'll send them free Simpsons stuff." So everybody in our families got like hats, dolls. I mean, it was so kind of them. It was so nice. I mean, that just doesn't happen, They're just cool people.
What are those little highlights? Because I know that along a career, there's always those little moments that you think, "Oh, this is cool. I'm glad that this happened." What are those moments? Is there some that come to mind?
I don't know. I mean, there's the obvious things, like cover Rolling Stone, Grammys, the stuff that you think someday, if you get there, that's the thing. But honestly, it's those moments where, you're playing a show and the show is going okay and something happens. It's that magical moment in rock and roll where you say something, you do something, and you play the right song, and suddenly everybody feels they're in the right spot. And to me, I've had 10,000 of those moments where you're like, wow, this is why I'm in a band. Because being in a band is so much fucking bullshit. It's so much bullshit. Everyone's always telling you what to do, including your grandma, and everyone's got an opinion, and so there are those pure moments on stage where it's like, you're just that connection. That's what makes it all worth it. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but honestly, that's it. That's where it works.
There's
Oh, thank you. And the other stuff is they're like trophies on a mantelpiece, but that's not why I do what I do. That's never made me feel happy. I mean, you feel proud, but it doesn't make you happy. What makes you happy is that exchange.
There's a famous Australian comedian, probably our most famous comedian is a guy called Barry Humphries, who does a famous character called Dame Edna Everage, and he used to talk about performance as that he would walk on stage in front of thousands of people, and the first thought that went through his head was, alone at last. Right? Is there a moment while you're on stage where you do feel like, that it's a peaceful moment for you, or is it always, sort of energetic and something where you kind of, the audience is demanding of you?
No, I'm an assassin. That's what I do. I'm a soul assassin. I'm serious. I'm cold-blooded. I'm like a cold-blooded snake up there.
Really?
Yeah.
Like the whole time you're on stage?
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, look. If anybody remembers the old band, kind of. Right. The cheeky MTV interview. "So, what's it like to be in Australia?" Right? Okay. They'd say, "Come on, you don't seem like you're having any fun." And I'd say, "We're not here to have fucking fun. We're here to blow your fucking head off." That's what my band was for. Other people could jump around and jack each other off, whatever, I don't fucking care. We were there to kick your head in, and we're here to kick your head in a different way, not as violent, but...
Well, how has it changed though? I think that's interesting to me, because it seems to me from an outsider's perspective, as someone who was fascinated by your music very early on, and I've always, the bands that I love are the bands that get to a certain point where they're like, well, we've done this, we've been the biggest band in the world, now we want to see how interesting we can make this, see how far we can push what it is that we're doing. I mean, I look at bands like Radiohead who went, we could fart out songs that Coldplay would love, but we've decided to go in a different sort of direction and and like kind of push ourselves. Is that what you're doing with your music?
Yeah. I mean, there's two music businesses. There are artists and there are, cookie makers. And the cookie makers just do the same thing over and over again, trying to perfect that one cookie. And if you're dumb enough to keep buying the same cookie, well, there's a business for those people. Artists are here to change the world, change your head, change your clothes, change your mind. change your sexuality, something's got to change, you know, because after that, what is it? You know what I mean? Because pleasure, look, everybody in the audience at some point's been in love, right? I'm sure you could think of somebody that you'd rather have sex with that might be hotter, right? But that doesn't mean you're gonna love them, okay? Being in a band that means something is about love and that exchange of love. It's not about pleasure. Hey, you're so funny. Hey, you're great.
I enjoyed that though.
Well, good. You know what I'm saying? Artists, my idols, the John Lennons, the Bob Marleys, the Tom Waits, the Neil Youngs, they're not there to please you. They're there to change something about the way you see the world. And then you come back with a level of gratitude saying, you know, when my mom died or I lost my fish, that song, me and you, that's love. That's love. The rest of it is just a bunch of porn, let's face it.
Is there something that you know now that you wish you'd known when you first started out?
Oh God, that's really tough. I would say this. I used to have a sort of arrogance, you know, which was like, damn right you're here, you know, come on. And now I have a different appreciation for the audience because maybe when I was younger and from where I came from, you know, I was so blinded by the opportunity. I didn't really appreciate like I do now. Like even driving, it's like muddy and people come from all over. The energy it takes to be in the spot together. I have a different appreciation for that. I was sort of arrogant about it before, like, yeah, you should be here, you know? Nothing better to do. Now I really think like, wow, people have to give up time. You know, I mean, even I got pets, it's like, you gotta think like, what do you gotta do with the pets? And, you know what I mean? I appreciate that because then that's the opportunity for me to communicate and my band to communicate with you. So I'm more humble in that now, and I think that's the biggest change in me. Beyond that, I'm musically arrogant, you know what I mean? That's no mystery there. But I'm not about the moment, I'm not arrogant anymore.
Can I ask about the difference between, like, having seen you both at a festival and seen you in your own shows live? Now, obviously, when you're doing your own shows, you have, like, you know, a group of people who've come specifically to see you. You have an environment in which you can put your own set in, your own show in, all those sort of things. So obviously, you know, that's the environment for you to do the best show that you could possibly do. But what is it about playing a festival and a festival stage that is great, and what is it that makes, you know, playing festivals worthwhile?
The good part about a festival is it can be and should be a celebration of that communal moment where we're all in the same spot. Because somebody in this room is going to die in the next year. Let's face it, that's a little bit grim. Might be me, might be you. It won't be you though.
It might be me.
You're going to live forever.
Thanks, man.
But the point is we don't know when we're gonna be back here, and that's what I'm saying. It's the opportunity is fantastic. What you do with the opportunity, you know, somebody out there is screaming for some song I wrote 15 years ago, and of course they don't want to hear the other song I wrote from 15 years ago. They want to hear the one that they've, you know, lost their virginity to, or, you know, I don't know. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, that guy obviously lost his virginity to the opening bars of that song, apparently. Ladies and gentlemen, I could talk to Billy all day, but I know that there's a bunch of people here who also would like to ask him some questions. So what I'm going to ask you to do is put up your hand. We'll find someone with a microphone who is nearby you. Firstly, the guy who's dressed as Where's Wally. That's probably as good a place as any to start.
Hi Billy, Waldo from your childhood. We know you went missing in action for a little while, and some of us know that you worked really hard to make Oceana an album that we wanted to come and see. We want to come and see our greatest hits show. Have you got some ideas what you're going to do? How long you're going to stick around? How many more times you're going to kick us in the ass?
I see Smashing Pumpkins in this form as about a 4 or 5 more year thing. I'm 45, so that makes sense to me. I think the band has to morph and become more visual, more multimedia. I think music is fantastic, but let's face it, most of us are on our phones all day, and it's not. We're going to need some other way to engage us, and visual things, or the new technologies, whether it's going to be holographic or, you know, we're going to have to engage. And if the band's going to stick around, we're going to have to find new ways to connect. And I think it's within the band's musical and emotional architecture to do those things. So I'm not afraid of that. But just doing two-dimensional music, I think it's probably already passé in the music business. It's just held on to that technology because they don't know what to do. But if they really let it loose, I think you'd be seeing a lot more cool stuff from everybody.
I did see Tupac's hologram at Coachella. You could just tour a hologram whole show. Over here, I believe we have a question, yes? Oh, hang on. You were just going to come right up the front. Awesome. There's no way you look crazy.
Come into the light. Come into the light. There you are.
Hello, Toast. I was just wondering, like you were saying before about technology and stuff, how do you think that with Australian Idol and Everything's Got Talent and all that stuff, how do you think old school bands go against what they're doing now? Like, how do you think, if you're a new artist today, how would you find success? It's not probably your way.
That's a fantastic question, honestly.
You're welcome.
She said I know. There's that Aussie humility. It's a fantastic question. I think when the music business first started really changing into the gear that it's in now, in the late 90s, with the rise of American Idol, and now, of course, we have X Factor and everything, I think there was a reaction in the alternative community because all the sales started going down, the radio stations started dropping off, that you kind of had to embrace, let's call it a little bit more of a pop mentality, and I think that's proven to be really a bad idea.
Is there a pop song though that you?
Oh,
do you have a guilty pleasure? Is there something that you?
No, there's nothing wrong with pop.
Yeah.
I've been living pop for a couple years. Trust me, I get it. Nothing wrong with pop. In fact, pop is really, it's the right kind of porn. Let's call it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all good. But if we're talking about rock and roll, visceral, not that. Bands are going to have to go away from that way of making music. Look. Most of the bands that are celebrated by the snobby blogger world, the pitchfork world, they're pop bands in cool clothes. I'm sorry, but a lot of that music I hear, it's just pop music. Now it doesn't mean it's bad, but it's pop music. I grew up on Susie and the Banshees, The Cure, Bauhaus, New Order. These were bands that were so great they had pop hits because they were great. Blue Monday became a massive hit because it's such an amazing song, not because they were in the studio thinking about the American Idol world. So alternative music has to go completely away from that. But at the same time, it can't fall into this snobby thing it's falling into, because what it's doing is it's really constricting the bands and keeping them from mainstream success. And I think we haven't seen the mainstream success of alternative bands in the last 10 years. I mean, yeah, everybody here knows who's headlining, but if your cousin doesn't know it, the Bogan over there, you're not really getting anything done, because that's what messes with the world. We have to have these great bands come out of the alternative ranks and mess with the mainstream, and if they don't, it sort of, at some point, it just falls into itself. It becomes a self-absorbed thing. It's like, look how cool you look. Look how cool you look. Wow, you look amazing. You look amazing too. That doesn't change anything.
You talk about bands that you love, like The Cure and New Order, but you would have been on lineups with these people over the years. What is it like the first time you played with the band that inspired you to pick up an instrument in the first place?
Well, one of the greatest experiences in my life was I got to tour with New Order, actually in New Order. I was part of the band. I did 6 shows, which is not a lot, but I got to rehearse, so you're talking about a month in New Order. And when they play New Order songs, they play with the backing tracks. And, of course, it's that sound. Dun, 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 dun. It's great. But when they would play Joy Division songs, suddenly you're playing with Joy Division. Minus Ian Curtis, of course, but I mean, you're playing with the sound of Joy Division. That was mind-blowing. To stand right there and it's like, Joy Division, 3-dimensional, that was, wow. One of the greatest bands ever.
We're definitely going to get some other people to have an opportunity to ask a question. I know this fella down the front's been sitting here right from the start, and he also has things to sign, but we'll get to the things to sign afterwards. But have you got a question as well?
Your guitar that's coming out, when?
You say that again, sir?
You've got a guitar model coming out by Fender.
No, actually, I did have a guitar model by Fender and I just stopped doing that. Sorry. Yeah. I don't want to tell you the backstory, but it's actually very silly. So I had a guitar maybe for 4 years, the Billy Corgan Strat. I actually still play them, so they're good, and if you find one, it's cool, but no, ixnay on the guitar game.
No, that was your whole question though. Unfortunately, it was a question like the TV show Lost from a different time period. Mate, over there, we've got a guy in the green hat, and he's got his arm up in the air like he's in a celebration. And then we'll try to get to the fella behind him as well. So let's get to this fella first. What's your question?
Hey Billy, got two questions. One from Australia and one from me. One from me is listening to Oceana. A lot of tracks remind me of the songs that came out of the residencies in North Carolina. So a lot of acoustic folk stuff. When writing Oceana, did you go back to there? Because I mean, all those songs from there were awesome when in North Carolina.
No one knows what you're talking about. God bless you for asking a fan question. But no, what he's talking about is songs from about 2007. I don't feel that personally. To me, a song's a song. I don't care what period it's from. There's a lot of songs that I write now that if I produced them like Siamese Dream, you'd say, oh, it's a Siamese Dream type song. Only because of the sound of the production. People get caught up in production. I mean, look, I know only so many chords. It's like sad song, sad song, sad song. Self-obsessed lyrics, sad song. I mean, you know what I mean? It works. I go back to the well, there's more pain, and I mine it up, and we just start over.
It makes it for an easy set list though. Sad song, self-obsessed.
Actually, we do actually have a few happy songs, and it's really hard to put them in the set. Because it's like, well, I don't want to, it's really ominous here, I don't want to spoil the...
Is there anything that you don't like to play anymore? Is there like something that people always request that you just don't enjoy playing?
There's a few. But I found through the years that people can seem really picky about songs, but I think that's a sort of a fool's game. It's really not about songs. It's about whether or not the whole show grabs them. Somebody's always got some obscure B-side to try to impress me, you know? I don't know. It doesn't mean anything.
All right, let's make sure the guy up the back there who's been waving for ages in the hat with the beard gets to go. So we'll go to him next, then we'll try to come down here to these girls who are down here next. So, yes, mate?
Hi, Billy. One of your close friends passed away recently, Dennis Fermion, the Frogs. Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. He drowned.
Could you share one of your favourite memories of the Frogs or of Dennis?
Wow, that's incredible. Does anyone here know the band The Frogs? Please, if you could, you can find stuff on YouTube. The Frogs were a band, I think they started in the late 70s. I met them in around 1990 when we were recording our first album. Beloved by Kurt Cobain, Eddie Vedder, Evan Dando. I mean, they were one of these bands that anybody who came in contact with them was sort of in awe. So imagine like two brothers writing these incredible songs, but subject-wise, they're really strange and irreverent. So they didn't really fit in anywhere. Some people would compare to the band Ween, if anybody knows Ween, but good band. But Ween was sort of more of kind of a jokey ha-ha, and they would say that, I think. That was my impression. The Frogs were just strange. They were naturally, but so musically gifted. And there's tons of stuff on YouTube if you get a chance to see the Frogs. Yeah, Dennis was 57, was out swimming with his family, and he just drowned. We're still not sure what happened. He just went under and didn't come back up. So, real tragedy. And if you get a chance, just to give a little speech here, the Frogs are what indie music is about. They don't fit in. They're never going to be on the radio, but yet they influence and they inspire people like myself and Kurt Cobain, and that's what indie music's really about. It's about being yourself, not this new version of conformity, which is the same old version of conformity.
Can I say that I had not heard of them before you started tweeting around the unfortunate situation of his death, and then of course I went and had a look and whatever. Do you think that with something like Twitter, it does enable you to sort of share those sort of ideas with people? Because I was immediately like, I can go and click on this, I can go and look on the clips on YouTube, and I can discover this band.
Yes, that is the beauty of where we're at now, which is that we can share, and I can share, and maybe even if 50 people walk out of this room and go look up the Frogs, it's awesome, and that would make Dennis happy, and his brother Jimmy. But here's the beautiful thing. So I said, because obviously I was mourning the loss of my friend, and so I said to fans on Twitter, I said, please send me your favorite Frog song, and I'll retweet it. So song after song after song, I kept retweeting cool stuff. And at the end of the day, his wife wrote me and his daughter, and they said, "This has been so comforting to us today because we see all the love that, you know, our dad and our husband had in the world." And so seeing all the fans reaching out and saying such nice things, it gave them a sense of comfort. That's where community works, you know? Not, you know, what is some guy, yesterday I looked at my Twitter, some guy wrote, "Shave your beard." Shave, literally, that's all he said, "Shave your beard."
Fuck that.
No context. No context, like, why?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have about 5 minutes more left with Billy, so I want to get to as many questions from the audience because I know that there are people here who want to say things to him. There's been some girls over here who've been waving over and over, so can we have maybe this girl here in the... Yeah, you can ask a question.
Hi, I was wondering, what was the turning point for you in your attitude towards your fans, towards your music, and becoming more positive about it? What was that turning point for you?
It's a really good question, and I'll try to keep it short. I went through some really hard times in the early 2000s that didn't really have anything to do with music, although losing my band the way that it all went down wasn't easy. But I went through some personal things, and I considered very heavily just quitting music, because for me, music had just become this repetitive drone of do this, do this, do this, and I didn't get into music to be somebody's robot. And even my fans, you know, there's still a segment of fans that are still asking for 1993 all over again, which of course they fail to realize that they're only complaining about something that I created for them to complain about. Do you know what I mean? They act as if somebody else created it and I just happen to hold the car keys. So somewhere in that period of loss and musical unhappiness, I sort of fell back in love with rock and roll. And I had to kind of go through almost like a public death process where I had to let go of the old dream, which, as I started off by saying, you know, the 90s was very promising. I mean, we really did feel we were going to change the world for the better, and more importantly, we were going to change the music business. And all the music business was just, they changed their rules and just fucked everybody a different way, including me. So, but I fell back in love with rock and roll, and then eventually I had to learn that my negativity about the business was poisoning my musical thinking, and that my negativity about what I expected of fans, or what I thought fans expected of me, was poisoning my musical thinking. So once I sort of purified my musical mind again and got back to the same guy who made demos in his bedroom, then I started to realize it's all good. I've had an incredible life. If nothing good ever happens again, if I never sell another record, I never sell another ticket, I've had a great ride, and if this is the end, it's the end. And all of a sudden everything started getting great again. Because maybe just because I was back in a positive place. But I had to go through that, and I do appreciate the fans that stuck through. One other thing I'll add, at the risk of going on and on, is that part of what I've always done has been a bit of public theater. I'll be a particular person on stage, not so much now, but in the past, because I would want to provoke the audience one way or the other. And you've seen this play. It's rock and roll gets so boring. You know, I watch these young bands and they jump around like it's the greatest show ever, and I'm standing there and I know it's not the greatest show ever, and they're pretending. You know what I mean? In a way, it's really disrespectful to all the people who've come before, because all they've done is to steal all the moves, and you know what I mean? They're not really feeling that, and it's insulting to the audience to act like they're feeling that, because it's no better than American Idol, right? But having been through all that, then you have to realize that you have to connect to the audience very viscerally, and if you can, the audience will come. They will come and meet you halfway, and that's the beauty of rock and roll. And so in that, I've been reborn.
Can I ask you a question?
That's too long an answer, I'm sorry.
No,
I've been through a lot.
It's a fabulous answer, because I often think about this, which is this idea of that, of course, a lot of people are getting something from your work. But what do you get from your work? What has your work taught you? What has it given you by doing this work, by producing this art? What have you got out of it?
I honestly don't know if I can answer that question. There's all the obvious things, you know, like you get recognized at the cafe kind of thing. But I don't really know. It's been such a crazy, mixed experience. You know, like somebody will write and say, you know, I walked down the aisle to your song yesterday. And I think, wow, that's incredible, you know, it's such an important moment in their life, and they chose one of my songs. What an honor. And then there's the guy, shave your beard. You know, it's like, I don't know how to put those things together as a sensitive person. You know, the world, as we all know, and this has nothing to do with the music business, it's a brutal place. It's a really hard, cruel place. Good people die for no reason. Children get cancer. Planes crash. I mean, there are things that we, like the thing that happened with the Batman. I mean, you know, everybody's there, yeah, Batman, the great, and then this guy shoots everybody, you know, because he's whack job, you know. There are those moments that we can't reconcile what reality's giving us, and I have yet to be able to reconcile my experience in music. It's been really strange, and I've made it strange, thinking that at some point it was going to wash itself all the way out. Oceania at least feels like a new beginning. And we just played in Perth, and the fans were incredible. We played the whole new album in sequence. Amazing experience for the band to get that love back for so much work and so much waiting. But it's hard to say what it's going to be at the end of the day. I mean, because who gets remembered? Who's going to remember any of this stuff? I mean, I read stuff where people... I'll give you a perfect example, okay? This is just me complaining, but you'll appreciate why I'm telling this. There was this guy who used to write... He was the editor of Spin magazine, right? I didn't like this guy, he didn't like me. But when the band was big, he had to deal with me, right? Well, eventually when the band started going down, then he started sticking his boot in us. And the last conversation I ever had with the guy towards the end of the 90s was an argument over them putting Biggie Smalls on the cover of Spin, but it was the year Biggie Smalls had been shot. To me, they were celebrating just as much a culture of death as they were celebrating Biggie Smalls as an artist. And I called them a task for that, because I just spent the previous 8 years hearing them castigate alternative musicians for embracing their wealth, and here now they were celebrating a bunch of artists whose celebration of a particular culture had ended up with people dying. So me and him get this really mean argument. Okay, whatever. He goes his direction, I go mine. This guy just wrote a book on the history of MTV. Okay? And I see the book on the shelf, History of MTV. Oh, it's this thick. I see the guy's name, and I'm like, this is gonna be interesting. I opened the book. There isn't one mention of my band in the book. Okay?
Not one.
Not one mention. I mean, he's written me out of history, and my band out of history. Now, that's the stupidity of rock and roll, because obviously we were on MTV a whole lot there for a while. We made some really important videos. We won MTV awards and all that stuff, but this guy had to write us out of history. And that's the part about rock and roll that I just think, oh, fuck you all, you know? Because it's like, but there's 20 pages about the band that no one's going to remember. That's where I go in.
Yeah, but at the same time, thousands of people have come here today to see you talk, and if
You sure they're not here for you?
If that guy was one of my guests, there'd be fuck all people here. Those who can do, those who can't write books about the history of MTV. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have Billy here. I want to ask one more question from the audience. So, whoever it's going to be, it's going to be you down the front, because you sat right down in the very front seat.
He has a Jesus.
I'm sorry to everybody else who didn't
look.
get to it, but he does have a Jesus-like look.
It would be amazing if he actually was Jesus.
And this is how he announced that he was back?
I am spiritual.
You should have seen the panel beforehand. We were saying Jesus is the poor, is the homeless, is the scruffy guy with the beard. Here we are.
Yeah, it's true. Except Jesus was, I believe, was black. So
Will's made a fatal error here. He's given the microphone to a smart ass, and we had a moment earlier. And I just wanted to issue...
He thinks it's his show now.
I'm in the middle of something now.
I just wanted to issue a word of warning. If at some point later this afternoon, Will asks you to come back to his apartment to see some paintings he's made of you guys, I would exercise caution.
Well, you fucked that up with the last question, mate. That is not the way to finish with some bad joke.
This is not a question.
Oh, this is the question.
That's just the part.
Come on.
Is this your comedy partner?
Yeah, this is the comedy part.
I'm the plant.
This is wrestling, see? He's the plant.
Oh, he's the plant.
Yeah.
He was one who was there to prove that comedy was not as quite as easy as I made it look.
We know comedy is hard.
Yeah. All right, what is your question?
So I just wanted to say, you've been through the circus, obviously, a number of times. You prepare a body of work. It takes you a really long time. You put your heart and soul into it. You release it, and maybe things go one way, maybe they go another. I just wanted to ask, obviously, you're kind of in the thick of it at the moment, but how did you envision the reception of Oceania, and how has it kind of
actually coming to life now? Are you surprised? Like, what are you feeling about how things are standing right now?
Yeah. The overall response to Oceania has been incredible. And just to put it in context, when Jimmy Chamberlain and I came back in 2007 with the Pumpkins, people said, well, you can't continue with just 2 members. And the album wasn't that well received, although it sold okay. When Jimmy left, then I heard, you don't have the right to continue under the name, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. So to overcome the idea that I can't continue under the name with different people and then have people actually embrace the album, you can imagine it's like climbing up out of this super deep hole. I mean, the Pumpkins are not a level playing field. Anything I'm involved with, it doesn't start at 0, excuse the pun. You know what I mean? It starts with a lot of opinion, and I've invited that opinion, so that the reaction's been incredible. And what's beautiful is that people are listening to the album because we've created a good musical experience, and that's satisfying. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this afternoon. It's been an absolute honour for me to be part of it. Could you please raise the roof for Billy Corgan? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Of course, check out the Smashing Pumpkins tomorrow night. Of course, it's going to be massive. Tomorrow, at exactly the same time as this, we're doing a big comedy gig. Myself, Tom Ballard, Catherine Devaney, Dan Illick. It's going to be huge. We'd love to see you here. Have an awesome Splendour. Thanks so much for coming out.